Caspian and Lola are standing beside a waterfall at a well-known beauty spot. Lola keeps posing for photos near the edge. Caspian, losing patience, lunges at her, intending strictly to frighten her into thinking he might push her. Startled by the sudden aggression, Lola steps backward, trips over a tree root, and falls over the ledge to her death. Deliberate pacing. In the eyes of the law, Caspian has committed the Actus Reus of murder. He unlawfully caused the death of a human being. However, a murder conviction requires malice aforethought. Caspian lacked the required mens rea. He only intended to frighten her, with zero intention to kill or cause grievous bodily harm. This flowchart illustrates the doctrine of involuntary manslaughter. It is the exact legal mechanism designed to capture homicides, where a defendant causes a death but lacks murderous intent. Involuntary manslaughter is not a single unified statute. It splits into two distinct, highly technical architectural tracks, depending entirely on the defendant's baseline behavior at the moment of the offense. To secure a conviction in a scenario like the Waterfall Paradox, and to successfully pass a criminal law exam, you must accurately identify and apply the correct legal framework. Applying the wrong track to the facts causes the entire prosecution to fail. This diagram outlines unlawful act manslaughter, requiring three elements: an unlawful act that is objectively dangerous and causes death. The base crime must require intention or recklessness, not simple negligence. It also requires a positive act. A failure to act cannot trigger this charge. The second element requires the act to be dangerous. The 1966 case of R.V. Church established the definitive test for evaluating this danger. The Church rule dictates that dangerousness is determined by an objective test. The act must be one that all sober and reasonable people would inevitably recognize must subject the other person to the risk of some harm. The defendant's personal belief about the danger is irrelevant. We see this objective standard applied in Dawson. 3 armed men attempted a robbery, causing a 60-year-old attendant to suffer a fatal heart attack. The manslaughter conviction was quashed because a reasonable observer at the scene would not have known about the victim's hidden heart disease. To an objective bystander, the act did not carry an obvious risk of physical harm. Contrast Dawson with the case of Bristow. Defendants burgled a vehicle repair business located down a single-lane track in a remote rural location. The court held that a reasonable person would recognize the inherent risk of physical harm to anyone who might try to intervene. The burglary was objectively dangerous from the outset. Unlawful act manslaughter constructs liability entirely from the commission of a lesser crime. It escalates a minor criminal act into a homicide conviction based directly on the objective danger that act presents. This flowchart details gross negligence manslaughter, capturing deaths from fatal professional errors like medical malpractice. Securing a conviction requires proving a specific chain. The defendant owed a duty of care, breached that duty, and the breach directly caused the victim's death. Unlike unlawful act manslaughter, gross negligence manslaughter can be triggered by omission. If a legal duty is present, like failing to seek help for an overdosing sister in R.V. Evans, omissions create criminal liability.
The final element involves proving the negligence was gross. The landmark 1995 case of R.V. Adomako, involving an anesthetist who failed to notice a disconnected ventilator tube during surgery, set the modern standard. The Adomako rule dictates that ordinary civil negligence is insufficient. The jury must find that the defendant's conduct was truly exceptionally bad and involved an obvious risk of death, not merely a risk of injury. In these cases, the jury is deciding the exact boundary line. They must determine when professional incompetence stops being a matter for civil financial compensation and crosses into a crime against the state. Gross negligence manslaughter operates without requiring malicious intent. It exists to criminalize profound, life-threatening incompetence. When a fatal accident occurs on a public road, the legal framework shifts away from common law and into the specific statutory provisions of the Road Traffic Act 1988. A driver who causes death through dangerous driving cannot be charged with unlawful act manslaughter. Unlawful act manslaughter requires a base offense with the mens rea of intention or recklessness. Driving offenses are inherently crimes of negligence, failing the first foundational requirement of constructive manslaughter. This chart compares Section 1 of the Road Traffic Act against the Adomako test. Section 1 only requires a foreseeable danger of injury or serious property damage. It doesn't require a foreseeable risk of death, lowering the evidentiary burden compared to a gross negligence charge. For less severe infractions, Section 2B covers causing death by careless driving. This lower tier captures fatalities resulting from a momentary lapse in attention that falls below the standard of a competent driver. Parliament created these specific statutory anchors to streamline prosecutions for vehicular homicides, allowing courts to bypass the rigid, often ill-fitting requirements of traditional manslaughter tests. Returning to Caspian and Lola at the Waterfall, we can now map the facts to the architecture and assess criminal liability. We begin by ruling out gross negligence manslaughter. Caspian had no established legal duty of care to Lola in this context, eliminating the possibility of a negligence-based charge. We evaluate the facts under Unlawful Act Manslaughter. The base criminal act is simple assault. By lunging at Lola, Caspian intentionally caused her to apprehend the immediate application of unlawful force. Applying the church test to the assault, we ask if lunging at someone on the edge of a turbulent precipice is objectively dangerous. Any sober and reasonable person standing at that location would inevitably recognize that aggressive movement near a wet, unguarded ledge carries the risk of at least some physical harm. Finally, we evaluate causation. Caspian's unlawful, dangerous act was the direct factual and legal cause of Lola stepping backward, tripping, and suffering a fatal fall. Caspian satisfies all three criteria. He is criminally liable for unlawful act manslaughter. This comprehensive summary shows the structure you must maintain. To master homicide law, you must enforce a strict firewall between the mens rea required for an unlawful criminal act and the civil breach of duty required for gross negligence. Conflating the two tracks is the fastest way to fail a legal argument.